length.
Mhm.
Because that's sort of the problem we were trying to problem solve when it came to space. But then if you have it added right off of the current building, with that gap, so it's a separate entity, but not a separate entity.
Mhm.
It reduces the travel, it makes them more accessible. And we talked about rather, not building a classroom, but maybe a couple or a few. Together and sort of creating it, because then you can create a preschool area and move the preschool that's here now out, and that allows you to move. It also frees up classrooms and allows movement.
And based on that happening, I guess my question would be where and would it entail a 3757, like something that would need to be demolished somewhat soon? Like, I just don't know where, and if it's, if you're getting into like, we're gonna build this thing here, but then this one has to come down at some point because it's not structurally sound, and maybe that's not the case. I just didn't know if we know.
And they also wouldn't be attached, so that would be fine. Then you just have a gap.
Right, right,
We used to be attached.
right, right.
Tim, where were you thinking? Did you guys mention where you were thinking of?
And we did not say
Okay,
specifically.
we didn't know. Right.
I mean, it's worth noting that the original plan, I think, was, it was for a little bit more than that, but like a wing of classrooms.
Yeah.
Right.
Off of this backside, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got.
Yeah.
Does somebody know off the top of their head for a high school student, how much square footage?
34,
It's 34. So,
And pre-K?
Pre-K.
31, I believe.
oh, it is less.
So it was more for pre-K than.
Don't hold me on notice. It's 31 to 34.
Okay. Okay.
30, 35, just round it off for each student.
35-ish. Yeah, no, I was just thinking from a high school separate building standpoint.
Now, is that just classrooms or is that the other
That's your
auxiliary
classroom occupancy.
areas?
That's just occupancy for classrooms.
Mhm.
Because with the high school, you have a lot of extra spaces that are connected for other programs within the high school. So,
Were there other things that were talked about under additional structures on site that groups talked about? I want to make sure we didn't.
We didn't cross off any of the options for structure. We crossed off like the types of builds that we thought didn't make sense. We didn't think it would make sense to build a temporary structure or a less expensive structure. I think like if we're gonna build something, it should be a permanent structure.
Yeah,
We agree.
solid, yeah.
Hi, this is Brooke. Apparently I got bumped off. Can anybody hear me?
We did two groups, sorry. I think Sarah, you're recording again, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank
We'll
you.
just have two
Okay.
parts. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that's okay.
Jim, how much time do you want?
Okay, because at some point, are we going to get a chance to, Karina and I did have a discussion. So are we going to get a chance to discuss what we discussed?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, we can do that now. So what we're talking about, Bruce and Karina, is just that first question about what we can cross off the list.
Yeah, well, I feel we should cross off the community buildings. I think we really should have everything in one space. And I'm speaking that from two experiences. One, when I went to elementary school, they were remodeling the elementary school I went to, and we got bused to a school about 20 miles away. And I took advantage of it, but I don't think I learned a lot. And secondly, I know that, as our preschool keeps growing, we have kids that get sent to other schools. And I have a granddaughter that's eligible to go to preschool this year, and she's going to have to go to Waterford. And luckily, my wife and I are in a position where we can help our daughter and son-in-law with transportation. But they're both working, and so we'll help when we can with transportation. But I think we really need to have one building to facilitate our needs of whether we end up with a pre-K through 12 school, which obviously is what I advocate for, or something else. So that's one. We also talked about the regional high school, And I heard someone say something earlier, and they hit it on the point. It's just not something that in our CCSU people are interested in. When I was on the school board and dealing with Act 46, that was something that the Secretary of Education recommended. But the people in Marshfield and Plainfield prefer to have their own school. The people in Cabot prefer to have their own school. And for the most part, the people in Danville prefer to have our own school. So I would say for now, that should come off the table. It could certainly be a long-term goal because it may be something that we certainly should look at down the road. And so those are the two that I would say definitely should come off the table. And obviously, I don't think number 4 is a viable option right now, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Karina, did you want to share anything about that? First.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things that, first of all, I think, in my opinion, I wasn't here for the last meeting, I was here for the first one. Any discussions around what we want for our high school in the future, whether it be a regional high school or whether we want school choice, honestly, I just don't feel like that's the place of this committee or anything that we're going to come to a decision on, because those are just huge discussions that have already happened twice since I've been here in 2010. There's been 2 huge community discussions on this, and it just isn't something that we should be taking on. So I just kind of feel like we should be careful not to just to way down that path. But whatever we do decide should be flexible for whatever ends up happening in regards to high school down the road, because those discussions will come up again later. Personally, I think that I don't like the idea of pre-K being carved out in any way. I think there's real value. I know when we brought our kids here and they were young, there's real value to having the pre-K integrated with the kindergarten and the younger grades and right up through grade 8. I think that's something that's really special about the Danville school. You've got parents dropping off their kids at preschool, and then they got another one in 1st grade, and they feel like their kids are together at the same school and they see each other in the hallway. And I think that's really important, and it's valuable. And developmentally, the pre-K through 8, it makes sense for all of those grades to go together developmentally. I think if we're going to carve anything out, it should be high school, but that it should be on the same property. And I really like the idea of having a standalone high school. I think that there is something psychologically and emotionally and developmentally to leaving 8th grade and going to a different building. I think when you have high schoolers who just go down, middle schoolers who go to high school and they just go down the hall in the same school, you have the same behaviors, the same middle school behaviors continue. And I think that it may really benefit our high school to have those kids. Now they're in their own space. It's their own high school, and you can have like programming and posters and signage that's actually tailored to their needs as a high school. And that option, I think, allows you then to spread out through the current building, pre-K, K, all those grades could spread out through the current building and could create that really awesome pre-K through 8th building. Whatever happens down the road in the future, any of those options, if you went to a regional high school and that building that we made for a high school needed to be closed down, it could become something else. It could become vocational, it could become fine arts, it could become admin, it could become a different building. If down the road Danville decides to have its own high school and that it really expands and other people, then having that separate building as a high school is kind of a stepping stone in that direction. And you can see that gives you a chance to tease that out and see how it works as its own high school. If Danville shuts down its high school altogether, I just feel like that option gives you the most flexibility for whatever high school ends up being down the road, and it's the best for the students as it is right now. And I think if you don't put a cafeteria in it, they can walk across a little walkway to the cafeteria and to the current, to the gym and that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be that big a build if you just do the classrooms and spaces that high school students need. Okay, that's it. I'm out.
No, thank you, Karina. We actually, the group that I was in with Katie and Mary and Rob, we had a similar conversation about the high school being, in terms of a long-term, having a newer building there that, is flexible, that if things change down the road, we don't have to deal with that question right now.
It logically makes the most sense on the new build.
The other
absolutely.
benefit to having a really nice high school here is that we can attract tuition students, and tuition students are all good things for us. So if we become a regional high school by de facto,
Right.
that's just good news for us and our taxpayers for sure. And also for the kids, because then they're getting a much bigger class, they're getting more opportunities, because as those classes expand, we're gonna be able to expand programming, you have a lot more options, so.
Mhm.
Like, there's only benefit to really focusing on the high school for a lot of this, and I think, that's a place where we don't have a captive audience that we do for sort of K through 8. That if we can make that a choice. I think that's
You turn your investment more into a profit center potentially.
yeah, well, yeah, we don't want to profit off of schools, but.
Yeah, that's okay. And I don't know if Sarah has a thought, or Sean, or anybody else, so if there was an emphasis on this high school space, which seeming like logically it makes a lot of sense, would, what would need to happen in the school here in order to make the rooms, compliant? Is that a big deal? Like, is that possible? Does that mean getting into, like, we're starting to break through walls and get into that whole construction roadblock that we ran into? I just don't know. I mean, hopefully that's workable, because then there's opening up space and hopefully it could be used in that capacity. But I just didn't know if anyone knows what that means. If we go with high school at some point and then we're trying to make usable space for the needs.
Around the design aspect, I think it's possible
Yeah,
and doable.
yeah.
Main problem is the old infrastructure, electrical and stuff like that. That may be below slabs in walls, things like that. And again, you don't have to demolish them, you can abandon them in place sometimes. And you can add on, on walls, in other words.
Like the duct thing you were talking about, yeah.
Yeah, your issue will be drainage for new.
When you're
That would be
envisioning
below slab.
the high school building, I guess I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what that would look like. Are we talking classrooms, or are we talking classrooms and a gym? Are we talking classrooms and a gym and a cafeteria? Because what you're describing is a whole nother building where people leave and they are there, but I don't think that that's reasonable. I think we'd be looking more at what St. J has and what LI has, which would be an open campus where you have classrooms over there, but students travel freely back and forth.
The high school.
That's what we were thinking.
And the reason I ask is because when you're, depending on the scale of the project, we're now. I just wonder financially where that's putting us now, because what you're describing sounds like it's going back towards that $60 million build versus, and I guess maybe that was the other reason that in my mind I was focused on pre-K, because you can build 2 classrooms or 3 classrooms and have accomplished the goal of spacing. And I just because I'm already like, oh, this could be awesome. Like, I'm already like, let's rally behind building a high school over there, but then we got to put plumbing over there and we got to put electric over there and we've got to and so what now is the financial impact and how many classrooms are we talking about? Because that's the other part of it. Like, if we moved all of the high school out of here, all of the high school classrooms, and you don't have to, that's the thing. It's like, because they could come back here for their world language. You could have a true free
Still
flow.
a much smaller campus.
Right, you
Some of the
still,
other ones.
I don't know that I would want to park my car between where the high schoolers walk, but like you could, like you could have.
Whole high school at one
Right,
time.
and so I want, I just. That vision to me is exciting, but I also just wonder what the cost is, and that's why, like, again, we also talked about the build that's almost attached to the building. Cause it's like, electric,
Yeah.
But if you build a new building, you need a master plan, because eventually a lot of these older buildings will be old one day.
That's what I thought.
And they'll be obsolete and they'll be falling apart. And you need a master plan that says, okay, this is the start of a new building. This little building is the start of a new footprint. Okay, that's
It's a
what you
smaller
have to look for, the long view.
Right.
And not get in the situation that we're in now, Or they added on just, here and there.
But I think it's really good financially, like for us to be aware of
Right.
looking at the different options of what is the number difference. And that's where I was even wondering space wise with the high school, like what footprint are we actually even talking about? And does that open up, like when you look at here at inadequate space, ceramics needs to share the shop, et cetera, et cetera. If some classrooms move over there, do these, does that open up space for some of these other issues? And then again, high schoolers can walk back and forth freely, easily. But I think what you're bringing up, in my opinion, bottom line for all of us, I think, is the money. Where are we gonna land on those two options?
What if
So,
we just put those as questions that we don't know right now? So
Right.
We have the space requirements and then the cost of a separate high school building.
So Molly, I would also put like, maybe it doesn't have to be space requirements for the entire high school, like
Right.
Tim said, there's an option of like, maybe we just make 4 high school classrooms for now.
And then there's
That fixes the space, immediate space issue, there's an option of a master plan for adding on.
It's like fully modern and
Well, right,
ready.
and yeah, and then you pick 4 kick-ass programs and you're
Right,
like,
and
we're
put
gonna
them
have we're gonna have a modern
Right.
science
Yeah.
lab. Or
Right.
we're gonna have a modern, like you
Yeah.
pick. You don't just build a like, this is the,
Right.
this is where you learn language arts.
And
And,
whatever you
like-
build, it ought to be a good, strong draw
Right.
for
Right.
other students
Right.
from other areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Make it the best you can.
We could improve on the yurt for sure, like, we know that that's already drawing kids and it's a yurt, like. You know,
we're gonna have shirts. And I would love.
I'm not advocating a lot of yurts.
Really like out of California here.
Hello.
I'm not advocating a lot of yurts.
Yeah. I wish there was a way to do a hand raise. I couldn't find it on the thing. I just, when it comes to space, I wouldn't picture just in a totally separate, fully functional high school. I certainly picture that as just a place that you have the high school classes. But I think at least it should allow for enough space to open up to fill the needs that we're trying to fill for the other things in the undergrades, right? So you're saying that you need a certain number of new classrooms for preschool, you need, a new science, like, I think that space should at least just give you the space in the current building to fill those other needs without having to then tear into walls and remodel, so that you don't get into all of that cost that we were talking about with a full remodel. Because to fix the roof, to fix the HVAC, those things are going to exist no matter what. And that I think goes into a separate bucket. But if you can drill down into what space is needed and then go like, okay, let's make that space in the high school and pull them out for that. And then how can that be reconfigured in the current space?
Right, and then thinking about with the preschool, we have to have the bathroom, and so we do have to do some renovating.
There are.
Yeah, there'll be some
There are
jackering.
4 classrooms that have bathrooms.
Right, so we would be okay there.
2 kindergarten and 2 preschool. Yes, they are not ADA compliant, but we're currently using them. So it wouldn't, I don't think it would be an immediate, it would be great if we could open them up a little and make bigger bathrooms, but those 4 classrooms would work for preschool.
Mhm.
If the kindergarten could move up the hallway a little bit, first grade moves up the hallway, everybody moves up a little bit.
Right.
And I wouldn't discount phasing in other things, like phasing the construction. So like we're saying, building this, but we still have to do some rehabilitation or repairs.
Mhm.
So that's gonna cost some money. So there's nothing to say that we couldn't put in the excavation and do the groundwork and maybe get a modular that could house 4 classrooms out there while we're doing the repairs to move everybody up. And then break the ground to build the actual building the next season or something like that, like phase it in so
Like
that.
rented space, you mean, like?
Maybe, or yeah, because, or maybe you use it for future other things, but I'm just thinking like, you have some immediate needs that have to happen to this building. And you're gonna have to do some things to be able to move the kids up, right? And get that fixed. That's gonna cost money and you're gonna go to the taxpayers for that. You're also gonna go to the taxpayers to get a plan to be able to build a new building. But groundwork is very expensive. And that might be the first way to cut the teeth on the building to be able to get that going and create the master plan. Because you're gonna need to be able to have that and have expansion and have all those things built out or planned out anyway. Just phase those things in. So I think that you could probably do a combination of some of these things to be able to get both needs met at the same time.
Yeah, and that would be another question, once we figure out, we have numbers and we have our plan, then how are we phasing it in, what's realistic for the town with taxes and
Right.
how we're gonna make that work financially, what's realistic.
And in the meantime, keeping an eye on, the AOE or the state bonding sort of thing, like, and depending on the timeline of that, but. that
We
can
will
be
all come together.
Really, I know, the money's there.
I know.
So should we should probably move along, yeah,
Okay, great.
but it sounds like we're generally going down the same road of possibly a separate high school segment that has some classrooms. Long-term, keeping regional and high school choice in the long term and staying focused on what we can do now.
Yeah.
All right,
And then, of course, just, the finances, we need to all look at the finances. Again, we're back
yeah.
at sort of that. And I don't know, space wise, compared to what the sort of game plan was from a separate space,
yeah,
how that would compare to if we just did a high school and what the footprint would look like.
yeah.
So again, I think then we're getting in, once we get to that part reality, that could be a major reality check,
Right.
like, whoops, we're
So
back
that-
at square
that's a
one.
good question. Where do we go from here in terms of those minimum space requirements for preschool and high school? Who do we go to find out?
Can we talk about number two, the question number two? That might help us think what
Yeah.
information-
It's also the capital outlay financing formula that they use when they're building schools now, and it takes the square footage per
Okay.
student. So on this one, it's, if you're building a school, it's 50 feet, 50 square feet for kindergarten. It doesn't have preschool on there. It's 30 square feet for what they call general instruction, which I'm guessing is just
That's like.
first grade through.
Do they have like how much per square foot cost wise, like current at this point?
There's some equations at the bottom that I need.
Yeah.
Still need to figure out, but-
time.
Would it be reasonable to ask that information from the, from
That's the 1998.
This is 2006.
Okay, so they retired that.
They did
That
that.
doesn't exist anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the way the
Just in
state
terms of
funds.
Like a ballpark number, where would we get in terms of for a preschool, if we were doing a preschool space?
It's
for-
probably in Truex, like if it in
You can use
Truex.
those as
that's
sort of.
old.
Use the numbers,
Ballpark.
okay.
It's old numbers, but it gets us
Okay.
somewhat,
You have
in a
the
vicinity.
most recent numbers, you saw those somewhere?
Those, they don't exist. They were supposed to come out on January 15th, but the AOE is delayed.
Okay.
So we're what?
Yeah, I would wait for them.
But they were supposed to redo the numbers.
Okay,
Okay. It's a long-
going on to, agenda item number 5, strategic planning.
Well, you wanted to talk about number 2.
I think we can like for those pretty quick.
Yeah, let's just popcorn them out. We don't
Yeah,
have to go
so-
by group.
Where do we need more? We have a list of some questions there that we'll write in a list.
We had others from my group. We actually didn't cross off number 3, the demolition and rebuild. We had a question of what it would actually cost. I didn't know if we ever asked that number. We weren't sure if we had the number of what it would cost to tear it down.
Well, they didn't demolish the old building.
Just that building, though, I thought the demolition was like did we demolish
It was all except
All
for the
except for-
oldest building.
Right, so we were asking what it would cost if we just tore down the 57 building.
The 37.
Or maybe.
Probably.
I don't think you'll get support to tear everything down.
Oh, is it going down?
I think you have enough people in this town who will not support building, tearing down, a complete tear down.
Not a complete tear down, just the old buildings. that
Oh,
are
just the
like-
old
ones that are having
ones. Okay.
structural problems.
The thing we don't know is what it costs to even keep that building going. I mean, they showed us the electrical, they show us a 37 panel and you're going, oh my gosh. And what other things are in that? I mean, are we looking at, 10 million just to bring that up to getting air moving around good and having the electrical system and heating? Is the boiler and 37 boiler in there?
Boiler's brand new.
Oh,
Well, that's it.
I mean, what do you think, Sean, on that, so going down that road and getting, is it worth getting numbers on what those?
I can look into it for sure. Structurally, there's nothing wrong with building. There's nothing. The only building I found any structural damage is the most recent building that was built.
Oh, interesting.
With 89.
For the block in the 1950s.
Not surprised.
The 57 don't expand again.
That's this cylinder block, right?
In the
The
89.
57, right, but the
Oh, in the 89 building.
Oh, it's
I thought-
the 89 buildings got,
Yeah,
huge
I know
cracks.
that, but
yeah,
I thought in the 1950s.
Yeah, and the true next told us 57 was in
Yeah.
structurally.
Marvin also has told us it was the 57 with the cinder
Yeah.
blocks.
I would go with that.
That we can't put anything on top of, there's
Yeah,
just a
that
weight
was-
issue.
oh, weight issue for sure,
And
and
we
as far as
can't-
like the building crumbling down, if we left the building as it is.
Really?
there's-
Marvin was talking about. like,
That's a
you
good
just poke it,
clarification.
the
Yeah.
Blocks like that.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cylinder block.
So would you say,
I haven't
Sean,
seen
that
that.
we should just scrap that option, in your opinion?
I don't wanna throw my opinion out there.
Are you saying, Sean, that 57 is absolutely structurally sound besides you can't put any weight on it? Do we know that?
As far as I know, the only issue with that would be to add weight to it.
So otherwise, there's not a safety issue involved. It's like functional space. It's,
To my knowledge, no
Right.
one's ever brought anything to me or has discussed anything with me
Okay.
about the 57 building being in any way structurally unsound.
Compromised.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was, and they had mostly just said like, we can't expand off of it.
Can't do anything.
Yeah,
with it.
can't do anything off of it.
Wouldn't
or
be able
add
to tie
any,
on
like,
to
air
it
handlers,
or
yeah.
build on it.
But if it stays the way it is.
safety wise.
Oh, that was the issue, the minute you touch it and you have to
Right.
put money into it, it's not.
But if we're not gonna touch it.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, if you are gonna look at that option of building onto it, then you'd have to obviously
Yeah.
take it down.
Probably
and
tear it
rebuild
down, right.
Okay, so
Well, that's helpful. That was one of the
Yeah.
questions, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Other questions? For the long term was like leaving the option of assessing cost of tuitioning high school again. And in the future, if people were interested, and then for number 5, we had that as our long-term plan, so there's a lot of information around that we would need, like, are the other towns interested, is it financially viable, demographic trends?
You're saying that as a long-term good idea?
We think the regional high school, yeah, that's what we had as a long-term option, and there's a lot of questions around that, so for number 2, what information is needed? A lot of information would be needed.
And were you going, not that that's the conversation of, or like the focus right now, but were you guys keeping in mind like the twin field combo? Cause that's what seemed to be such a like roadblock on the last round, was the fact that like twin field and that.
There was people that brought a regional high school up as an idea
Mhm,
recently in a CCSU meeting, so it's being brought up
Yeah.
by other towns. I think it's an option.
mhm,
I was at that meeting, it was brought up by a Cabot board member
mhm,
about the possibility of more collaboration in a regional,
mhm.
talking about a regional school.
Yeah.
Would the vision be that we would build a school here that would become a regional school?
I have no idea what the vision would be, it's just.
Yeah, no.
It's all-
Act 46 discussions.
Yeah.
In that scenario, it would have been built in Cabot with, because it's in the center of, you got Danville, Cabot, Twinfield.
Right.
In that discussion back then, it was, Cabot was considered probably the first place.
Right. It seemed like there was a lot of like opposition townwide. Who knows where people are
Well,
at
and that's-
now, but
I'd be curious to see what changed, whether it's just a board member's inquiry versus a townwide. Because,
Yeah.
you know, we talked about the challenge with a regional high school is. Right now, with the challenge with small towns is a lot of our pride and a lot of our events happen within that space.
Right.
And so, there's just a lot of pride and emotional attachment
mhm,
that you get into, and that's what we found when we were going through the Act 46 process, was everybody was passionate.
mhm,
And everyone was passionate for different reasons.
right.
But that's what makes that a challenge, as well as, and we talked about the actual geography.
Yeah.
The
busing.
Hills and valleys.
over hill and dale
Mountains.
between.
Busing was huge.
That's
That's
a
a
huge
thing, it's a
issue.
huge
Yeah.
issue.
But the Cabot conversation, because of what's going on sort of currently in their situation, that might be interesting at some point to really explore if they're open, if people are open to that. Especially if we're end up moving in the direction of this separate space.
Yeah, it was
And
brought
have
up-
been some of their buildings been condemned? The Cabot, yeah. Don't know. if
They've got
anyone
major issues, but I don't know how.
has- They did, okay, yeah,
I think that would be again, we talked about farther down the road.
yeah,
Something to
exactly.
Kind of put in our back pocket.
Yeah.
If it comes up again to, maybe they wanna explore it, I think it's worth
Yeah,
talking about it.
it's
and-
like there's a reality of. The high schools are all fairly small, and like Twinfield mentioned that their enrollment has been going down in the past 10 years, so.
By 100 students.
At some point, there's a reality of like how many students you need to run a viable high school.
Right,
So it's worth leaving it as a long-term option if the other towns are interested in having that.
Mhm.
Right now, all 3 schools are the same baseball, softball teams, so
Right.
it's like step one, maybe.
Definitely,
Right,
we're already
right.
combining sports teams because we don't have enough students to
Right.
run our own, so it's.
And I think the conversation changes when money's involved too, where you could feel, I feel very passionate about the school as well, but then when for a taxpayer, when it comes down to paying a very significant amount of money, I think that's when their opinions can start to shift.
Yeah.
It becomes a really difficult conversation at that point, but
Mhm.
Well, and I think our conversation can be different in this town too. Not to bring up old, but the fact that we're no longer the Indians, for some people in this town might make it easier to also say, okay, now we're ready to detach ourselves as the older generation who were here.
Mhm.
From the school and look at what how the kids will best benefit and look at it in a different lens.
Mhm.
Because there's already a little bit of a separation there, and though that having already happened may actually lend itself to.
I think the big question that like I have no idea is like the finances, like Molly said, like. If, what would the tax impact be to build a regional high school? I have no idea, like in the long term, would it actually lower everybody's taxes? And then maybe people will be like, wow, cool, I get this. You know, a larger household group and more program options and my taxes are the same or didn't go up extravagantly. I have no idea.
Bruce might have insight, if, I don't know if that's necessarily the conversation for right now, because it's like long term, but Bruce probably has input on that, yeah.
And to be quite honest, I think that because we're talking that long-term tuitioning high school students, in regional high school, it's the same bucket.
Mhm.
Like then all of a sudden you've got to decide,
Mhm.
would you rather tuition your student out? Or go to a regional high school where you're losing all choice of what you would like to do?
Mhm.
Because
it's helpful to have this for me, it's helpful, I didn't know where everybody stood on that, and this conversation is so different than it was when we had a $70 million bill, so I think this, at least for me, has been helpful to hear from all of you that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense of come to reality where it's like, I think all of us kind of come into this and saying. I'm gonna lose that 37, or it's maybe it's, something else that you're really passionate about, but at some point you have to let emotions go, and it's just comes down to practicality and financial feasibility for taxpayers. While at the same time accomplishing the needs of the kids.
Right.
well, right, we don't want Danville to be a ghost town because the taxes are so high, that
Yeah.
nobody wants to live here.
The cost impact is gonna be the biggest deal.
Right, you gotta be a growing town to have it.
And there's great opportunities to do neat new things for kids, and that's the thing too, is that when
Yeah.
we're looking at this. We shouldn't just be looking at how can we continue to provide for kids, but how do we challenge them and how do we provide something new
Mhm.
and exciting?
Mhm.
Because that's the other part too, is if we're gonna change something, let's not just make it about building a room.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's
It's gotta be.
let's build an
attractive.
experience.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
build something that's worth.
Coming
Worth
to.
building.
Yeah.
Which I like the idea of the high school starting
Mhm.
with the high school, because it's a rite of passage, like I think emotionally and psychologically.
Mhm.
These kids are like, hey, I'm graduating, like literally moving to a
Yeah.
better spot.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a
And that can
great,
be built upon, and it's not as big, it won't be big a ask, who knows, maybe once we explore the costs, we're like, oh my god.
No,
Break ground, like.
Good idea.
Yeah, well, there's 60% is just breaking ground.
well, that's why I was saying that, you gotta look at phasing in, because that might be the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, like plan is just to get the high school built.
Right.
You know,
You gotta crawl for it.
that's right, that's right.
Hi,
Meeting.
hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Yes, we got you, we hear you.
Hi, somebody said something about Bruce may have some information on this. just
I
to
don't
let
know if
you
you were gonna
chime in.
do it, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, she was just thinking maybe down the road, but what we're thinking now, is because we're getting close to 8 o'clock, is if we put the agenda item, what was the number 5, Dave?
Right, strategic plan.
Move that, are you all okay with moving that to the next meeting?
Yeah, so
Yes.
And then, if we could, I would like to note any other questions where we need information, and then any other thoughts on the prioritizing the options, if anybody has.
You complete your list.
I have
Okay.
Can I have a scope, one more question on?
Sure.
Anyone hear me?
Yeah,
Do we have, so I was here for the first meeting. I didn't hear the second one, and maybe this was done at last meeting. And so I haven't heard it today, but that may be because you all have it in front of you. Have we clearly defined the problem we're trying to solve? Like, do we have a clear definition of how much we need, how much more room we need? What are we needing for space? Has that been?
yeah, that's where
Okay.
we have that on the board, Karina, so I think
Okay.
the minimum requirements for space, if we're doing a separate building, I think total, do we have that information, Sean, total what's needed for space? Oh, it's there, yeah,
Most helpful.
yeah.
Is it in the minutes?
So Karina, if you go to the building site, the website.
Yep.
You'll see the program report from Sarah and that's Larry put that together.
Okay.
So look at that, and then Sean put together the facility needs, so those are
Okay.
on the site now, but
Okay.
but yeah, I think our next step is looking at if we're doing a separate building for high school or preschool, how much do those cost essentially, and what do those look like? You know, is it just a couple of rooms? Is it, you know, what's needed for preschool if it's a separate building and what's needed for high school if it's a separate building? Am I correct about that?
And if the preschool building is gonna be like these guys were saying, like built next to an existing
Right.
one versus is it gonna be part of like the? And again, I think that's gonna come down to cost,
Yeah.
and, you know.
Right, needing some numbers on, you know, on those buildings would be our next step. But yeah, any other questions on, or information that we need, that we don't feel like we have at the moment from any of the other groups? Money. Right, money. And so, yeah.
We did kind of express interest in the new demographics,
Right.
which are constantly changing at this stage because we are getting the in-migration from urban areas
Yeah,
and from climate change areas. And so we need to look at if we can get some impact on Vermont. It was on the NPR about a week and a half ago. It was a whole a gram on it, and it was a Vermont expert. Because it's affected them.
yeah.
So I'm interested,
And I think sort of on that, if you don't mind me saying, is again, just going back to what you were saying, Tim, was making it attractive, like if there's gonna be this level of an investment in this high school, how is it attractive? Because obviously some people might say, oh, you don't have choice, I'm out. You know, how, and obviously we don't know numbers on that or what the impact would be, but if you had this really amazing high school that was attractive, then it is gonna draw people and that's gonna help the tax base and if there's even places to buy, I guess in general,
Right.
you know, but just that part of it, so.
Okay.
Cause that is a commitment, you know, thinking about that high school,
Right.
it's a commitment,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's still a space, I mean, Karina brought that up, right? Like, it's still a usable, functional space for something regardless, but
Right.
yeah.
And that's what we wrote that down, we were kind of making notes here as everyone was talking, and I put it, make it able to be restructured to fit future needs, just in case, I mean. That's the whole point.
flexibility.
Depending. on
Yeah, you
trajectory.
need flexibility,
Yeah.
just build the boundaries of it and then figure it out, you know, I mean, right now you've got a lot of issues on the table.
Right.
okay. And then anything else with prioritizing options, sounds like we're on the same page with, we need another building. Whether it's preschool or high school is the question, okay. And Sean, I mean, is that something that you all wanna work on in terms of the finances?
Yeah, I can start with that stuff, sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
I think it would be helpful to
Yeah,
we just
I would
have
say
like,
too.
think about how many rooms the high school would actually, like Karina was saying, how many rooms for the high school would fix our space problems in this building, like so that everybody could move a little? How many rooms would we need? I don't
And
know.
are they rooms, or is it like Tim was saying, like you do this like science space, this like, you know, are they sort of like just classrooms for space, or are they like intentional for programming?
Well, they should be intentional for program, but I'm saying how many of them, so that would help Sean to know what size this building would be.
The number I heard was 4.
Yeah, that's what I kept.
That's what I
going back
heard
to.
before.
Four classrooms.
That's-
Yeah.
So if we moved
That-
4 high school
That's
classes
our
out.
current need.
That's our current,
Current.
so
5
next year
years
should be
from now?
different. 5
But
years
if-
should be.
But if
But
it's
if we
built
start with 4,
intentionally. it
Right,
could be added up.
This is
Exactly.
expandable, like you
Because
think
the other-
about it as expandable.
it'd be better to build 4 awesome ones than
Yes.
6 okay ones.
Right. Right. Just go in 4 high school bathrooms and see what that.
Yeah, that would work.
With the
Or
potential to
awesome.
add on.
Or awesome, yeah.
It's in the record.
But that matters, because this table is very different than a lab table, I will
Yeah.
tell you that, like
Yeah.
as far as cost.
And
It's a-
space.
It's a very different,
Yeah, one be appealing.
Right.
And it's
How
a-
many high school classrooms are in the high school right now?
Have to count.
That's a variable number, Karina, because we've got a lot of
Variables there, so.
What's the?
spaces that aren't traditional classrooms that are being used as classrooms. So that's a tricky.
Oh, count 'em.
That's-
Those are middle school.
What would you say generally, Sarah, is it like 8 or 5 or?
For total classrooms,
Yeah.
Oh, you
I've
dad.
got-
I mean, full-size classrooms, we've got
I do like
Oh,
it's not.
We've got 8 like full-size classrooms,
Yeah.
but then there's a lot of smaller spaces like foreign languages in a tiny space, but 8 classrooms that are closer to the size that you're in now. But the classroom that you're in now is almost double most of the elementary classrooms.
Sarah, would it be possible
Okay.
for this meeting to come up with the need, like what is needed ideally in terms of, or do we have that somewhere in terms of a space?
I mean, we've talked about that a lot. Yeah, it should be in some of our meeting notes for
Okay.
sure.
Is there a blueprint that indicates for those of us who don't know where everything is, where things are?
Well,
We've got the existing.
Yeah.
So
So
that
we can. pull
Yeah, that's a good
that-
idea.
pull that together about, we do have your program report here.
And then.
I do think though the conversation are touched on pretty broad about space, so if
Right.
we're asking to like
Specifically.
tell us what we need for high school space, like
Yeah.
that to me is a different question.
Or even what the need is for the
Exactly.
younger
Yeah.
grade space, so that you could, as you're building on the lowest end, ensure that if you're gonna build and move some classrooms out, you're gonna absolutely get the space that Sarah's talking about they need.
Yeah.
So maybe that becomes a starting point.
Right, but I think we need to be clear, like we're asking about building high school classrooms,
Yeah.
they're different than preschool.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Sarah, did you hear that? Just being specific, if we were
I will
actually.
say with all the wind we got going on,
Can you move, can you?
I muted him. Sorry, Bruce. Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. So we would just have to look at moving and kind of like we talked about, there's definitely temporary walls throughout the building that have been built. So could some of those come down if we added some new classrooms to make bigger elementary classrooms?
Yeah. Is that putting too much on your plate right now for you and I guess Dave and Sean again? To just let us know, I think that we need to know number of classrooms for a high school building.
I mean, I think like, I think what Tim said is, I mean, we could give you a lot of different numbers. It's all about the affordability, like we've talked about a lot. And if we want to build 4 purposeful classrooms that are built well and designed well with a master plan in mind, like Rob is talking about, that seems like a doable thing.
Okay.
I think that's a good starting point
Alright,
to
let's
see
start with
where
that
it is,
then.
and we can
Okay.
work to vet it out more from there.
Okay, that's helpful. So four high school classrooms will go.
As long as that would free up the space that they need immediately.
I think it would.
It seems like,
It would
yeah.
give you 2 preschool classrooms.
Right, that would give you your two more
Two more
preschool classrooms, that should be fine there.
Mhm.
Okay, so that looks, okay, all right.
An extra question, which maybe impractical, but to look at the renting cost of a relatable classroom, if they're available in state. We did that up in Anchorage. We had a lot of them that went between schools as the schools
Yes.
that would increase or get less, you know.
Yeah.
But Vermont may not have any of those. I don't know, but it'd be good if you looked into that because we may need that for a year or two.
Yeah.
Right.
For transition, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
We gotta go on to the next step. So for scheduling, we're gonna table on strategic planning. For the next meeting. For scheduling of ongoing meetings. Wednesdays work good for. For everybody.
Actually, I'm flexible now that the other event that I was into.
Tuesdays work better until the end of baseball season.
You can do Tuesdays now?
When is it?
Yeah.
Well,
June 16th,
June 16th.
June 7th.
Yeah, actually, probably,
Yeah.
it depends on.
How does
Or
June,
it's T-ball, so, oh, yeah.
June 13th look to the group?
What about for you?
I'm not
here, but getting those numbers, will it take a while to determine?
When
it's graduation.
it's gonna take a while to get them no matter what, but I'll start on them right away and get whatever we can get done.
If we do a month out, is that reasonable?
It'd be more helpful, sure.
Okay.
You want the June 20th then?
I think a later date gives a little more time between the board meeting too, in case there's pieces that come out of the board meeting.
All right, let's do the 20th, sounds good?
It sounds great.
Tim?
I will not be here on the 20th, but feel free.
If we want to move to the 21st, that's after base, you know, for me. I mean,
too.
First day of summer.
Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, my first day of summer, maybe. I'm looking.
You're next to the first day of summer.
Nope, I lied, I can. Yeah, I can't do the 20th or the 21st.
So, for the group, the 20th or the 21st,
Either way.
21st. 21st will work for me.
21.
That is Wednesday, right? Yeah.
We should probably check with Clayton too, just to make sure. Oh, yeah. It'd be nice if he could come.
Tell them what we've decided. Yeah.
He's invited to the. And right, we would, if he can't make it, then we'll have to
Then we'll have to
discuss possibly moving it.
Okay.
Okay. And for the record, Clayton is at a, is it the VSBA annual meeting that he's required to be at as a board chair, so he did not have a choice missing this meeting, and he would want to be here.
Thank you, yeah.
Any public input? Future agenda items? We'll need strategic planning.
Maybe anything else?
Start 6. Yeah.
Tim, you had something?
Oh, I guess the numbers are from Sean. He has them.
So the HVAC, the lighting, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I planned
The
on
high school building.
right.
in there of
I'll tell you back in the-
Burley. Oh, over yonder. Yeah.
There's any update?
Yeah,
Truex numbers is 7.5.
that's where I was.
Anything else for future agenda item? If you can think of one, you can email Clayton. And
Make a motion to adjourn,
I'll second.
8:02.
all the say